You've set the alarms, you've read the books, you've watched the videos, maybe even ones like this. You've made the vision boards, tracked the habits, journaled the goals, said the affirmations out loud in the mirror, and felt slightly ridiculous doing it. You've worked hard, genuinely hard. And somewhere along the way, a quiet thought crept in. One you probably haven't said out loud because it feels like giving up. What if all of this isn't working? Not because you didn't try hard enough. Not because you need a better system, a better coach, a better morning routine, but because the whole project, the idea that there is a self to improve, might be the most sophisticated trap your mind has ever built. Today, we're going somewhere a little uncomfortable, and I think you're ready for it. Here's something nobody in the self-help industry will say publicly. The system is designed so that it can never be wrong. Think about it. You follow the method. It works, the method gets the credit. It doesn't work, you get the blame. You didn't want it enough, you didn't visualize clearly enough, you didn't believe deeply enough, you didn't hustle hard enough. There's always another enough waiting for you. And the truly cruel part? The more earnest you are, the more you genuinely care, the harder the system hits you. Because you keep trying. You keep buying the next book, the next course, the next retreat. Not out of laziness, out of devotion. You are the perfect customer precisely because you take it seriously. And that devotion, that sincere, honest hunger for growth, gets quietly redirected into a loop. A loop that generates revenue for someone else and generates shame for you. I want to name what that loop feels like from the inside, because I think you know it well. You start a new practice with genuine excitement. Things feel different for a few weeks, more alive, more intentional. Then life happens, the discipline slips, the excitement fades, and instead of the practice adapting to you, you conclude that you are the problem. So you start again, slightly harder this time, slightly more punishing. Self-improvement for a lot of people quietly becomes self-punishment wearing very expensive activewear. Now here's the question that changes everything. Who is doing the improving? You might say, me, I am. But what is that me? When you sit quietly, not in theory, but right now, and you look for the one who is trying to improve, what do you actually find? Thoughts, feelings, sensations, memories, a constantly shifting stream of experience, but a fixed, solid, permanent self that stands apart from all of that and needs to be upgraded like software? See if you can actually find it. In Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual tradition rooted in the Upanishads, this is not a philosophical puzzle. It's the central invitation. The Atman, the true self, is not something that develops. It is the ground from which all experience arises. It is what you already are before the self-improvement project begins. Ramana Maharshi, one of the most direct teachers of the 20th century, had one consistent response to almost every question. Who is asking? Not as a deflection, as the actual answer. Because if you look closely enough at the one who is suffering, the one who is striving, the one who is not good enough yet, you start to notice that this character, this person, is more like a weather pattern than a permanent resident. The thoughts arise, the feelings come and go, the identity shifts moment to moment. And underneath all of it, holding all of it, something is simply aware, not broken, not incomplete, not in need of improvement, just present. There's an image I keep returning to, the ocean and its waves. When the waves are rough, when the surface is chaotic and turbulent, we don't say the ocean is broken. We don't build a program to fix the waves. The waves are the ocean, expressing itself through form and motion and change. The self-improvement project is very occupied with the waves, taming them, optimizing them, making them perform better, What non-dual wisdom points to is the ocean, not instead of the waves, not by denying that the waves exist, but by recognizing what the waves are made of. There's something else worth naming here, something that doesn't get said enough. The self-improvement project, at its root, requires you to believe that you are not enough right now. That is its operating premise, and that premise, repeated daily, reinforced through every new goal and every missed target, does something to a person over time. It creates a chronic background hum of inadequacy. You become very skilled at spotting what's wrong with yourself, your weaknesses, your patterns, your shadows. You develop extraordinary self-awareness and almost no self-acceptance. The spiritual traditions we draw on here, Vedanta, Buddhism, Sufism, Stoicism at its deepest, all point in a different direction. Not self-ignorance, not bypassing, but seeing clearly that the one you've been trying to fix was never actually broken. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna doesn't tell Arjuna to become a better warrior. He tells him to understand who he actually is, beyond the role, beyond the story, beyond the performance. The transformation isn't an upgrade, it's a recognition. I want to be careful here, because this teaching has a shadow side. You don't need to improve can become a spiritual excuse to stay stuck, to avoid the genuine work of healing, of growth, of showing up more fully. That's not what this is. The invitation isn't to stop growing, it's to notice who you think is doing the growing, and to question whether that person actually exists in the way you've assumed. Because here's what's interesting. When that questioning happens genuinely, when you actually look for the separate self and don't find it in the way you expected, the growth doesn't stop. It becomes effortless in a way it never was before. Not lazy, not passive, but no longer driven by the grinding belief that you are fundamentally lacking. The Buddhist tradition calls this the difference between action from contraction and action from openness. The self that is always striving, always defending, always trying to prove itself, that self is contracted. Its efforts are real, but they're exhausting. They cost something. Action from openness looks different. It arises from the recognition of sufficiency, not as a concept, not as an affirmation you say to yourself, but as something you've actually glimpsed. And from that place, doing becomes much simpler, much lighter. Marcus Aurelius, Stoic emperor, one of the most practical philosophers in history, wrote in his private journals that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. I'd add something to that from where we're standing now. The one you think is standing in the way might not be as solid as you believe. So what does this look like in practice? Not as a concept, as an actual lived thing. It begins with a question, not how can I improve, but who is it that needs improving? Sit with that, not to answer it conceptually. You'll get 100 clever answers, but to look directly, to feel into the question rather than think around it. You might notice thoughts about the self, stories about who you are and who you're not, feelings about your performance in life. But can you find the one who is observing all of that? That awareness, the simple fact of being aware, doesn't have a self-improvement project. It's not running toward anything or away from anything. It's simply here. That's not a consolation prize. That is the ground everything else rests on. From that ground, your habits, your practices, your intentions, they don't disappear, but they stop being driven by the belief that you are broken. They become more like expressions of care. Care for this body, this mind, this life, without the desperate undercurrent of not enoughness. And honestly, that's when they actually start to work. The wave doesn't need to become the ocean. It already is. All that effort, all that striving, all those alarms and journals and visions of who you were supposed to become, none of it was wasted. It brought you here, to this moment, to this question. And the question isn't, how do I finally become enough? The question is, what if I never wasn't? That's not a destination. It's not something you achieve after years of practice. It's available right now, in this breath, in this moment of simply being aware. If something in this landed for you, if it named something you felt but couldn't quite say, I'd genuinely love to hear it in the comments. Not because I have the answers, but because this conversation is better when we're in it together. If you're new here, this channel sits at the intersection of ancient wisdom and real life, non-dual philosophy, consciousness, the big questions, without the spiritual performance. We have a whole thread on the Illusion series, the ego, the nature of choice, the self. If today's video opened something up for you, consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next one.